My name is Beulah, and I am 63 years old. I had been a widow for 3 years when that Christmas arrived. After my husband passed away from a heart attack, I lived alone in our small house, trying to fill the emptiness with hope. My son Marcus was all I had left in this world. I spent weeks preparing for that Christmas, baking his favorite apple pie, buying gifts. For my grandchildren, dreaming of laughter and warmth around the dinner table. But that Christmas changed everything. I never imagined that a single Christmas card would shatter everything I believed about family. Before I tell you what happened next, let me take you back to that morning when I was still full of hope, still believing that love could conquer all the distance between us. But first, I would love to know where you are watching this from. Please drop a comment and let me know your country or city. And if this story touches your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. You will not want to miss what happened after I read that card out loud. The preparations for Christmas had consumed my entire December. I spent 3 full days in my kitchen flour, dusting my apron as I rolled out pie crusts and basted the turkey I had bought from the local market. The house smelled like cinnamon and roasted pecans. I had gone to Target twice, walking up and down the toy aisles, carefully selecting gifts for Lily and Jake. Lily was 8 years old, a quiet girl who loved reading, so I bought her a beautiful hardcover collection of fairy tales. Jake was 5, energetic and curious, so I found him a building block set that I knew would keep him entertained for hours. I wrapped each present with care, using red and green paper, tying golden ribbons into perfect bows. My little house sparkled with Christmas lights. I had decorated the front porch with a wreath I made myself from pine branches and red berries. Inside, I arranged poinsettias on the windowsills and hung stockings above the fireplace, even though it was just me living there. Everything had to be perfect. This was going to be our first real family Christmas since my husband died. Marcus had been distant lately, always busy with work, always making excuses when I called. But he had promised to pick me up on Christmas Eve morning and bring me to his house for the celebration. I clung to that promise like a lifeline. The morning of December 24th arrived cold and bright. I woke up at 5, too excited to sleep. I checked my appearance in the mirror 3 times, making sure my grey hair was neatly combed, my blue cardigan clean and pressed. I had lost weight since my husband passed, the stress and loneliness eating away at my appetite, but I tried to look healthy and happy. At 9 o'clock, sharp, Marcus pulled into my driveway. I grabbed the bags of gifts and the pie I had carefully boxed and hurried out to meet him. Marcus looked the same as always, tall and thin, with dark hair starting to grey at the temples, despite being only 35 years old. He worked in information technology for some company I never fully understood. He wore wire-rimmed glasses and had a perpetually tired expression. When I climbed into his car, he barely looked at me. "Hey, Mom," he said, his eyes on his phone. "Marcus, honey, it is so good to see you." I leaned over to hug him, but he just patted my shoulder awkwardly. How have you been? How are Lily and Jake? I have been so looking forward to this. They are fine. His fingers moved rapidly across his phone screen. Work has been crazy. I tried to start conversations during the 40-minute drive to his house in the suburbs. I asked about his job, about whether the kids were excited for Christmas, about what Nadine had been up to. Every question received a one-word or two-word answer. He did not ask me a single thing about my life, not about my health, not about how I was coping with the loneliness, not about the volunteer work I had started at the library to keep myself busy. The silence in the car felt heavy, but I told myself he was just stressed. Things would be better once we arrived. When we pulled up to his house, my heart lifted slightly. It was a beautiful two-story home in a quiet neighborhood with a big front yard and a maple tree that turned brilliant red every fall. The outside was decorated with strings of white lights and a large inflatable Santa on the lawn. But as we walked toward the front door, I noticed something. The decorations felt cold somehow, like they had been put up out of obligation rather than joy. Nadine opened the door before we could knock. She was 32 years old, with platinum blonde hair that fell in perfect waves past her shoulders. Her makeup was flawless, her outfit expensive looking. She looked at me with an expression I could not quite read. "Oh, you are here," she said. No smile, no hug. Just those 4 words. I tried to smile warmly. "Nadine, dear, it is so wonderful to see you. Thank you for having me. I brought pie and gifts for the children." "Mm-hmm." She stepped aside to let us in. "Just put your things in the corner." I heard small feet running and turned to see Lily and Jake racing toward the door. My heart swelled. But before they could reach me, Nadine called out sharply, "Kids, go wash your hands, now." They stopped in their tracks, looking disappointed, and turned back toward the bathroom. I stood there in the entryway, holding my bags, feeling suddenly uncertain. The house was full of people. I could hear voices and laughter coming from the living room. As I followed Marcus inside, I saw them, Nadine's parents, Howard and Diane, sitting on the new leather sofa. Nadine's younger sister, Stephanie, and her husband, Brad, lounging in the recliners. They all turned to look at me, and the conversation paused for just a moment, before resuming as if I were not there. Nadine gestured vaguely toward an old armchair tucked in the corner of the living room away from the television and the main seating area. "You can sit there, Beulah. Make yourself comfortable." The chair was worn and uncomfortable, with one arm lower than the other. I sat down slowly, placing my purse beside me. Everyone else was gathered around the big flat-screen TV, watching some holiday movie I did not recognize. Howard and Diane sat close together on the sofa, holding hands. Stephanie was scrolling through her phone while Brad laughed at something on the screen. Marcus disappeared into the kitchen without a word. I sat there, hands folded in my lap, watching them, waiting for someone to include me. After about 10 minutes, Diane leaned over and said something to Nadine in a low voice. I could not hear it clearly, but I caught the words, "How long?" And Nadine's response was just loud enough for me to make out. "Just tonight, thankfully." My chest tightened. I pretended I had not heard. Stephanie started talking about their recent ski trip to Colorado. She described the resort, the slopes, the hot tub in their cabin. Howard chimed in about the expensive restaurants they had visited. Diane showed photos on her phone, and they all gathered around to look. I tried to lean forward to show interest, to be part of the conversation. "That sounds lovely," I said. "I have never been skiing. It must have been beautiful." Stephanie glanced at me briefly. "Yeah, it was great." Then she turned immediately back to the others. "And we are thinking of going to Aspen next year. Brad's company might cover part of it." They continued talking as if I had not spoken. I felt invisible. I tried again after a few minutes, asking about the new car they mentioned wanting to buy. Brad answered with a quick, "We are looking at SUVs," before launching into a detailed conversation with Howard about engine specs and financing options. None of it was directed at me. I was simply there, existing in the corner, not quite part of the family circle. The smell of roasting meat drifted from the kitchen. My stomach grumbled, but I felt too awkward to ask if I could help. Finally, I stood and walked toward the kitchen doorway. Nadine was there with Marcus arranging dishes on the counter. I cleared my throat. "Nadine, can I help with anything? I am happy to set the table or chop vegetables, or—" She did not even look up. "We have everything under control. You just sit there and rest." Her tone was not warm or caring. It was dismissive, like I was a burden she was tolerating. I opened my mouth to insist, but Marcus just stared at the counter, silent. So I returned to my corner chair and sat down again. I watched Lily and Jake playing with toys in the hallway. When I called out to them, asking if they wanted to show Grandma what they were playing with, Nadine appeared instantly. "Kids, go wash your hands for dinner. Now." She ushered them away before they could respond to me. I felt a lump forming in my throat. This was not what I had imagined. This was not the warm family gathering I had dreamed about during all those lonely nights at home. I looked down at the bags of gifts I had placed by the door. No one had asked about them. No one seemed to care that I was there at all. When dinner was finally ready, we all moved to the dining room. The table was set beautifully with china plates and crystal glasses. A centerpiece of red roses and white candles sat in the middle. But when I looked for my seat, I realized I had been placed at the far end of the table, away from everyone else. Howard sat at the head, with Diane beside him. Nadine and Marcus sat together with Lily and Jake in high-backed chairs nearby. Stephanie and Brad took the remaining seats on that side, and I was alone at my end, a good 6 feet separating me from the nearest person. The food was passed around, but by the time the dishes reached me, there were only small portions left. A thin slice of ham, a spoonful of mashed potatoes, a few green beans. I took what was offered and ate quietly. The conversation flowed around me, never to me. They talked about work promotions, vacation plans for next summer, gossip about neighbors I did not know. When I tried to share something about my volunteer work at the library, Stephanie yawned dramatically in the middle of my sentence. "That is nice," she said flatly, then turned to Brad. "Did you see that email about the bonus?" And just like that, my words disappeared into the air, unheard and unvalued. I looked at Marcus, hoping he might notice, might say something, might defend me, or at least acknowledge me. But he kept his head down, cutting his food into small pieces, chewing slowly, avoiding my eyes. My son, the boy I had raised alone after his father left, when he was 3. The boy I had worked 3 jobs to put through college, would not even look at me. I felt something crack inside my chest, a small fracture that would soon become a canyon. The meal ended and everyone moved back to the living room. Nadine announced it was time to open presents. She pulled a Santa hat from somewhere and put it on, playing the role of cheerful hostess for her family. She began distributing gifts from under the enormous Christmas tree that dominated the room. The tree was at least 8 feet tall, covered in matching gold and silver ornaments, looking like something from a magazine. Howard opened a box to reveal an expensive watch. Diane received a designer handbag. Stephanie squealed with delight over a spa package certificate. Brad got noise-canceling headphones. Lily and Jake tore into packages containing the latest gaming devices and dolls that cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. With each gift, there were exclamations of joy, hugs, thank yous. The room buzzed with excitement. Then it was my turn to give my gifts. I stood up, feeling suddenly self-conscious, and retrieved the wrapped packages I had brought. I handed Lily the fairy tale book and Jake the building blocks. They opened them slowly, pulling back the paper I had so carefully folded. Lily looked at the book, then set it aside without comment. Jake glanced at the blocks, then looked toward his new electronic toys. "What do you say to Grandma?" Nadine prompted, her voice flat. "Thank you," they mumbled in unison, already turning away. Nadine picked up the book, examining it with barely concealed disdain. "Oh, how thoughtful," she said in a tone that made it clear she thought it was anything but. She set it on a side table away from the other gifts. My cheeks burned with embarrassment. I had spent hours choosing those gifts, trying to find something meaningful, something that would make my grandchildren happy. But in this room, full of expensive electronics and designer labels, my offerings looked shabby and inadequate. I sat back down in my corner chair, feeling smaller than ever. But then something changed in the room. Nadine stood up, a strange smile playing on her lips. She reached behind the tree and pulled out a red envelope. The room fell silent. Everyone turned to look. "Wait," Nadine said, her voice taking on a theatrical quality. "We have something special for Beulah, a Christmas card we made just for her." She walked toward me, holding the envelope out. My hands trembled slightly as I took it. I looked around the room. Everyone was staring at me with expressions I could not read. Marcus sat very still, his jaw tight. Nadine stood over me, that smile still on her face. "Open it," she urged. "Read it out loud for everyone. Do not be shy." My fingers fumbled with the envelope flap. I pulled out a card with a picture of roses on the front. It looked homemade, printed on regular paper. I opened it and began to read, my voice uncertain. "Roses are red, violets are blue." I paused, my eyes scanning ahead to the next line. My throat constricted. But Nadine was watching me expectantly, waiting. So I continued, my voice dropping to barely above a whisper. We do not want a sick grandma. Christmas is not for you. The words hung in the air for one terrible second. Then the laughter started. Nadine threw her head back, cackling loudly. She clapped her hands together. "Oh my God, that was perfect!" she shrieked. Stephanie and Brad joined in their laughter, filling the room. Howard chuckled, shaking his head. Diane covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking with suppressed giggles. And Marcus. My son sat there on the sofa, his head still bowed. But I saw it. A small smile twitched at the corner of his mouth. He was amused. My humiliation amused him. I sat frozen, the card still in my hands. The laughter seemed to go on forever, bouncing off the walls, stabbing into me like knives. Lily and Jake looked confused, not understanding why the adults were laughing. I felt hot tears pressing behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of these people. Nadine finally caught her breath. "Come on, Beulah. It is just a joke. Do not be so sensitive. You have been sick so much lately with all your doctor appointments and complaining about your health. We thought it was funny." I had not been complaining. I had mentioned once in a phone call to Marcus 2 months ago that I had been having headaches, and my doctor wanted to run some tests. That was all. But somehow, in Nadine's mind, this had become ammunition for cruelty. Stephanie wiped tears of laughter from her eyes. "It is comedy, Beulah. Learn to take a joke." I looked around the room one more time, at these people who were supposed to be my family, at my son, who still would not meet my eyes, at my grandchildren, who were already losing interest and returning to their new toys. No one defended me. No one said, "That was too far," or "Maybe we should not have done that." They just laughed. And in that moment, something inside me broke completely. Not with a dramatic snap, but with a quiet, final crack. Like ice giving way under too much weight. I carefully folded the card and placed it in my purse. I stood up slowly, my legs shaking. "Excuse me," I said quietly. "I need to use the restroom." I walked down the hallway into the small bathroom and closed the door. I locked it, and then finally I let the tears come. But they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of rage, of betrayal, of recognition. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw a woman who had been a fool. A woman who had believed that blood meant loyalty, that raising a child meant earning respect, that love was unconditional. I had been wrong about all of it. I returned to the living room after composing myself. The laughter had subsided, replaced by casual chatter about dessert. No one acknowledged my return. I sat back down in my corner chair and waited. The evening dragged on. They served pie, but not the one I had brought. They served store-bought cheesecake instead. My apple pie sat untouched on the kitchen counter. Around 9 o'clock, Nadine announced that it was time for the children to go to bed. She ushered Lily and Jake upstairs without letting them say goodnight to me. Then she returned and looked at me with barely concealed impatience. "Beulah, we have the sofa set up for you in here. There are blankets in that closet." She pointed to a narrow door near the stairs. Bathroom is down the hall. We will see you in the morning. And that was it. No offer of a proper guest room, even though I knew they had one. Just the old, uncomfortable sofa in the living room, where I would be the first thing everyone saw when they came downstairs. I waited until everyone had gone upstairs. I listened to the footsteps above me, the running water, the doors closing. The house fell silent. I lay on that sofa, a thin blanket pulled over me, and stared at the ceiling. Sleep would not come. My mind replayed the evening over and over, the laughter, the card, the words. We do not want a sick grandma. I thought about my husband gone 3 years now. I thought about how alone I had felt since his death, and how desperately I had clung to the idea of family, of connection with Marcus. I thought about all the years I had sacrificed for my son. I remembered working as a waitress during the day, a cleaner at night, and doing data entry from home on weekends, all to pay for his college tuition after his father abandoned us. I remembered sitting up with him through countless childhood illnesses, holding his hand during nightmares, attending every school play and soccer game, even when I was exhausted. I remembered selling our big house and moving into a small apartment so I could help him with his student loan payments when he graduated. Every decision I had made for 20 years had been about giving him a better life. And this was what I got in return: public humiliation, laughter at my pain, a cruel card designed to make me feel unwanted and burdensome. And worst of all, my son's silence, his complicity, his smile. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, something shifted inside me. I sat up on that uncomfortable sofa, my back aching, my heart aching more. And I thought to myself with sudden crystal clarity, I deserve better than this. It was not a dramatic realization. It was quiet and firm and undeniable. I deserved better, and I did not have to stay in a place where I was treated with such contempt. I stood up and began folding the blanket neatly. I found my purse and pulled out a small notebook and pen I always carried. In the dim light from the street lamp outside, I began to write. The words flowed easily, as if they had been waiting inside me for years. I wrote to Marcus. I did not write in anger, though anger was there. I wrote in sorrow and truth. I wrote about the years I had given him, the sacrifices I had made. I wrote about how after his father left, he had been my entire world. I wrote about the loneliness of the past 3 years, about how much I had looked forward to this Christmas, about how I had believed that family would be my salvation from grief. Then I wrote about the card, about the laughter, about his silence, about the smile I had seen on his face. You allowed your wife to humiliate me in front of everyone, and you said nothing, I wrote. You smiled. In that moment, I realized that the boy I raised is gone. The man you have become is someone who finds humor in cruelty. I cannot stay here. I cannot pretend that this is acceptable. I am leaving Marcus. Not just your house, but this country. I need to find a place where I am valued, where I am treated with basic human dignity. You will not know where I am going. When you realize what you have lost, it will be too late. Goodbye, Marcus. I signed it simply, Mom, and folded it into an envelope. Then I quietly gathered my things. I took the gifts I had brought, knowing they would never be appreciated here. I left the cruel Christmas card on the dining room table, where Marcus would see it first thing in the morning. Next to it, I placed my letter. At 5 o'clock in the morning, when the sky was still dark, I called a taxi service. I waited by the front door with my coat on my bags in hand. When I saw the headlights turn onto the street, I slipped out quietly, closing the door with barely a sound. The driver helped me with my bags, and we drove away through the empty Christmas morning streets. I did not look back at that house. There was nothing there for me anymore. The taxi dropped me at my own house just as dawn was breaking. The driver, an older man with kind eyes, helped carry my bags to the door. He wished me a Merry Christmas, and I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. But I thanked him and went inside. My little house was exactly as I had left it. The Christmas decorations I had put up so hopefully now seemed like relics from another life. I stood in my living room for a long moment, feeling the weight of exhaustion and heartbreak settling over me. But I did not cry. I had cried enough. Instead, I made myself a cup of coffee and sat at my kitchen table. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. There was someone I needed to call. Someone I had not spoken to in over a year. Gerald Patterson. He had been my husband's best friend during the Vietnam War. They had served together, survived together, and stayed close even after they returned home. After my husband died, Gerald had reached out several times, inviting me to visit him and his wife Margaret in Portugal, where they had retired 5 years ago. "You would love it here, Beulah," he had said during our last conversation. "The people are warm, the pace of life is slow, the cost of living is reasonable. If you ever want a fresh start, our door is always open." At the time, I had thanked him but declined. I had thought my life was here with Marcus, with my grandchildren. I had thought I belonged in this country where I had spent my entire 63 years. But now, sitting in my empty kitchen on Christmas morning, I realized I had no real ties here anymore. No one who valued me, no one who would miss me. I looked at the clock. It was 6 in the morning here, which meant it was 11 in the morning in Portugal. I took a deep breath and dialed Gerald's number. He answered on the third ring, his voice surprised but warm. "Beulah, is that really you?" "Hi, Gerald. I am sorry to call on Christmas." "No apologies needed. It is wonderful to hear from you. How are you? How was your Christmas with your son?" I felt my throat tighten, but I kept my voice steady. "It was not what I hoped. Gerald, is that offer still open about visiting you in Portugal?" There was a pause. Then, "Of course it is. More than a visit, Beulah. Margaret and I have a small guest cottage on our property. It is yours for as long as you want it. Are you serious about this?" "I have never been more serious about anything in my life." "Then come. Come as soon as you can. We will be here." We talked for 20 more minutes. He gave me details about flights about the area where they lived in Porto, about what I would need to bring. When I hung up, I felt something I had not felt in years. Purpose, direction, hope. I opened my laptop and began searching for flights. I found one leaving on December 30th, just 5 days away. It was expensive, but I did not care. I had savings. I had my husband's life insurance money that I had been holding on to for emergencies. This was an emergency of the soul. I spent the next 3 days in a flurry of activity. I contacted a real estate agent about selling my house. I had been thinking about downsizing anyway. The place was too big for one person, full of memories that sometimes felt like ghosts. The agent was enthusiastic, saying the market was good and she could list it immediately. I sorted through my belongings, deciding what to keep and what to let go. I kept photographs of my husband, some jewelry, my favorite books, clothes I would need. Everything else I donated or sold. On December 26th, my phone rang. It was Marcus. I stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. "Mom, what is this letter? Are you serious?" His voice was angry, defensive. "Every word," I said calmly. "Nadine was just joking. You are overreacting. You always overreact to everything." Something in his tone, that dismissive certainty that I was the problem, made my resolve harden into steel. "No, Marcus. I am finally reacting appropriately. Where are you going? This is ridiculous. You cannot just leave the country because of a stupid joke. You do not get to know where I am going. You made your choice when you laughed at that card. You chose your wife's cruelty over your mother's dignity. I hope it was worth it. Mom, you are being dramatic. Just come back and we will talk about this." "There is nothing to talk about. Goodbye, Marcus." I ended the call. He tried calling back immediately. I did not answer. He called 6 more times that day. Then Nadine called, leaving a voicemail that was half angry, half mocking. "Beulah, you need to get over yourself. It was a joke. Stop being such a baby about it." I deleted it without finishing. They sent text messages. I did not read them. They sent emails. I did not open them. On December 30th, I locked the door of my house for the last time. The real estate agent had already listed it, and there had been 3 showings. My belongings were either donated in storage or packed in the 2 suitcases I was taking with me. I wore comfortable clothes for the long flight. I took one last look at the street where I had lived for 15 years, then got into the taxi, heading for the airport. The flight to Portugal was long but peaceful. I sat by the window, watching the landscape disappear below me. Then nothing but ocean for hours. I felt as if I was shedding an old skin, leaving behind a version of myself that had been too accommodating, too hopeful, too willing to accept less than I deserved. The woman who had sat in that corner chair, who had allowed herself to be humiliated, was gone. I was becoming someone new. We landed in Porto early on the morning of December 31st. The airport was smaller than I expected, but clean and efficient. I collected my bags and walked through customs, my heart pounding with a mixture of nervousness and excitement. When I emerged into the arrivals area, I saw them immediately. Gerald and Margaret stood near the exit, holding a sign that said, "Welcome home, Beulah," in colourful letters. Margaret rushed forward and wrapped me in a hug so warm and genuine that I almost cried. "We are so happy you are here," she said, her British accent soft and comforting. "We have been preparing for days." Gerald took my bags and we walked out into the Portuguese morning. The air was mild, much warmer than the freezing temperatures I had left behind. The sky was overcast but bright. As we drove through the city toward their home, I stared out the window in wonder. Porto was beautiful in a way I had not expected. Old buildings with colourful tiles covered their facades. Narrow cobblestone streets wound up and down hills. The Douro River sparkled in the distance, spanned by dramatic bridges. Their home was in a quiet neighbourhood on the outskirts of the city. It was a traditional Portuguese house with white walls and a red tile roof. Behind it stood a smaller cottage, just as Gerald had described. It had one bedroom, a tiny kitchen, a bathroom and a sitting area with large windows overlooking a garden. Margaret had filled it with fresh flowers and stocked the kitchen with basic supplies. "This is yours," Gerald said, setting my bags down. "Stay as long as you like, forever if you want." I looked around the small space, and for the first time in months, I felt safe. "Thank you," I whispered. "You have no idea what this means to me." The first few weeks passed in a gentle blur. I spent my days exploring the neighbourhood, learning basic Portuguese phrases, and slowly adjusting to a new rhythm of life. Margaret took me to local markets, where vendors sold fresh bread, cheese, and produce. We walked along the river in the evenings, watching the sunset paint the water gold and pink. Gerald introduced me to their friends, a mix of Portuguese locals and other expatriates who had chosen Porto as their retirement home. I met Dorothy, a British woman in her 70s, who had moved to Portugal after her husband died. She was witty and irreverent, and we bonded over our shared experiences of loss and reinvention. There was Antoine, a French man who had been a chef in Paris and now ran cooking classes from his apartment. There was Rosa, an elderly Portuguese woman who sold flowers on a corner near the river. Every week, she would give me a single flower and say, "Para a Senhora Bonita," which Margaret translated as, "For the beautiful lady." These small kindnesses meant more to me than any expensive gift ever had. I joined a Portuguese language class for seniors that met twice a week at a community centre. The teacher was patient and encouraging, and I found joy in learning something completely new. I started volunteering at a local organisation that taught English to children. The kids were eager and affectionate, hugging me when I arrived and showing me their drawings. I had not realized how much I needed to feel useful, to feel valued. My health improved too. The headaches that had plagued me for months disappeared. I slept better than I had in years. The constant knot of anxiety in my stomach loosened and finally dissolved. I realized that much of my illness had been stress, had been the weight of trying to maintain a relationship with people who did not want me. One morning in early February, I received an email from Marcus. I almost deleted it without reading, but something made me open it. The tone was different from his previous messages. Less angry, more desperate. "Mom, I do not know if you will read this. Nadine wants a divorce. She says I am weak. She says I should have defended her against you, that I let you ruin Christmas. I try to explain that you are my mother, but she does not care. She has already filed papers. She is taking the house, the kids, everything. I have to move into a small apartment. I can only see Lily and Jake every other weekend. Mom, I think I made a terrible mistake, but I do not know how to fix it. I read the email twice. I felt a strange mixture of sadness and vindication. Nadine had shown her true nature. She was not upset that Marcus had failed to defend her. She was upset that her plan to completely alienate me had backfired, that Marcus had let even a sliver of doubt show. She was a woman who demanded absolute loyalty and would destroy anyone who failed to provide it. Marcus was learning this lesson the hard way. But I did not feel the satisfaction I might have expected. I felt sad for my son, sad for my grandchildren, who would grow up in a broken home. I also felt a clarity. This was not my problem to solve. Marcus was an adult. He had made choices, and now he was facing consequences. I could not rescue him from this, nor should I try. I did not reply to the email, not yet. I needed more time to think, to decide what kind of relationship, if any, I wanted to have with him going forward. 6 months passed. It was early July, and Porto was warm and sunny. I had settled into a routine that felt natural and fulfilling. My mornings began with coffee on the small patio outside my cottage, where I could hear birds singing and smell jasmine blooming in Margaret's garden. I attended my Portuguese class, which had progressed to intermediate level. I volunteered at the community center 4 days a week. I had joined a yoga class that met at dawn in a park overlooking the river. Dorothy and I had become close friends. We took trips together to nearby towns, exploring castles and vineyards. Antoine taught me to cook traditional Portuguese dishes, and I had become quite good at making bacalhau and pastéis de nata. Rosa still gave me flowers, and I had learned enough Portuguese to have simple conversations with her about her family, her late husband, her memories of Porto before tourists discovered it. I felt lighter, younger somehow, despite being 64 now. The lines on my face had softened. I smiled more easily. I laughed with a freedom I had not experienced in decades. One afternoon, as I sat at a cafe near the Ponte Luis Eye Bridge, reading a book and sipping espresso, Dorothy joined me. "You look so peaceful now, Beulah," she said, studying my face. "Like you have found yourself again." I smiled. I think I have. It was true. I had discovered parts of myself that had been buried under years of trying to be what others needed. I had found strength I did not know I possessed. I had learned that leaving was not giving up. It was choosing myself. A few days later, a letter arrived. Not an email, but an actual handwritten letter forwarded through Gerald's address. The return address was Marcus's, but not the house I remembered. He had given me his new apartment address. I held the envelope for a long time before opening it. When I finally did, I read slowly. Marcus wrote about his divorce, which was now final. He wrote about the loneliness of living in a small apartment, of seeing his children only every other weekend, of realizing how much he had taken for granted. He wrote about therapy he had started, about conversations with his therapist that had forced him to examine his behavior. "Mom, I understand now what I did. I was a coward. I let Nadine and her family treat you like you were nothing when you are everything. I let them laugh at you. I laughed too. I see it now as the cruelest thing I have ever done. I remember when I was 7 and I had pneumonia and you stayed awake for 3 nights straight, monitoring my fever, making sure I was breathing. I remember when Dad left and you told me we would be okay, and you worked yourself to exhaustion to make sure we were. I remember you selling the house you loved to help me pay my student loans, and I repaid you with silence, with a smile at your pain." He continued, "I am not asking you to come back. I am not asking you to forgive me. I do not deserve either. I just want you to know that I understand what I lost. I hope, wherever you are, that you have found happiness. You deserve it more than anyone I know." I read the letter 3 times. Then I sat down at the small desk in my cottage and wrote a reply. I kept it short. "Marcus, you have learned a hard lesson. I hope you will be a better father to your children than you were a son to me in that moment. Do not let them grow up thinking that cruelty is funny, that humiliation is acceptable, that family means accepting abuse. Teach them kindness, teach them courage. As for me, I have found peace. I have found a place where I am valued. I am happy, Marcus. Perhaps in time we can rebuild something. But it will be different. It will be on my terms. Take care of yourself." I signed it and mailed it the next day. I did not know if we would ever have a real relationship again. Part of me hoped we might. Part of me had made peace with the possibility that we would not. Either way, I knew I would be okay. As I walked home along the river that evening, the setting sun turning the water orange and gold, I thought about the journey I had taken. I thought about that Christmas card, those cruel words, that laughter. I thought about how that night had been the worst moment of my life, and also, somehow, the catalyst for the best decision I had ever made. I stopped at Rosa's flower stand. She was packing up for the day, but stopped when she saw me. She selected a perfect red rose and handed it to me with her usual smile. "Para a senhora bonita." I thanked her in Portuguese and continued walking. When I reached the cottage, I put the rose in a small vase and placed it on my windowsill. Then I poured myself a glass of Portuguese wine and stepped out onto the patio. The evening air was warm. Somewhere nearby, someone was playing music. I could hear laughter from Margaret and Gerald's house, where they were hosting friends for dinner. They had invited me, and I would join them soon. But for now, I stood alone, holding my glass, looking out at the garden, where fireflies were beginning to flicker in the gathering dusk. I thought about all the years I had spent trying to earn love, trying to prove my worth, trying to be enough for people who had already decided I was not. I thought about the freedom that came from finally walking away. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give ourselves is permission to leave. And in that leaving, we do not lose ourselves. We find ourselves. I had spent 63 years being who others needed me to be. Now, at 64, I was finally learning who I was meant to be all along. A woman of strength, a woman of worth, a woman who deserved respect and kindness, and who was brave enough to walk away when those things were denied. The stars began to appear overhead. I took a sip of wine and smiled. Tomorrow, I would go to my yoga class, then teach English to children who adored me, then have lunch with Dorothy at our favorite restaurant. Tomorrow would be another day in this new life I had built from the ashes of the old, and it would be beautiful. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to put yourself first, even when it meant leaving people you loved behind? I would love to hear your story in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, if it reminded you that it is never too late to choose yourself, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about courage, resilience, and the strength it takes to start over. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it brings you comfort, hope, or simply the reminder that you are worth more than anyone's cruelty. May you find your own peace wherever that journey takes you. Until next time, take care of yourselves. And remember that sometimes walking away is the bravest thing you can do.